Hey everybody, welcome to Missing Links with John, Brock, and myself, Stephen King, where we discuss what's missing in Web3 architecture. This week we're going to kind of take a tangent, I guess you could say, and we're going to talk about a mining facility that we're setting up at my house in Telluride, Colorado. For feedback, please go to missinglinks.fm, send us an email, give us some feedback on what we discuss and what you'd like us to cover next week. All right, let's get into it. So Brock is gonna lead us, and Brock, why don't you kick us off here?
Yeah. So I figured we'd start with a little context on why. So, like from your guys' perspectives and kind of the industry, you often hear that like crypto isn't green, mining takes a lot of energy. So, like, what have you guys heard about that? What are your perspectives, and like what's being done right now to help with that?
John, you start.
So so that's the one Achilles heel that gets me because I like to stay green as possible, but like all technologies and things, they have to evolve over time. We're starting to see proof of stake happening sooner and sooner, but there are ways to integrate and actually optimize certain technologies to actually help with the mining capacity and the load. So a good example would be we're seeing in the Nordic states that they're using natural reserves to actually help power and cool their systems, but they've integrated certain components of AI to where whatever they take out and put back in, it is the same purity and temperature as it goes back in because it's pretty much pre-mixing itself as
Wait,
it's going through these
hold on.
systems. There's it's a
What do you mean by that? You're talking about the water, like they're water cooling and they're putting that back,
Yep.
or they're
Yeah. Yeah, so what they'll do is they'll use the water turbines to create power, siphon the water to then cool the system that is getting power from that turbine, and then use the power with a cooling element to get that temperature of the water from hot back to its original temperature before pumping it back in. That way, you kind of have everything is coming from that turbine, but the effect on the environment is very minimal than the original turbine.
got it.
What uh,
Cool.
what kind of efficiency do they get there? Like, are they getting actual energy from those, or?
So I don't know how it would work, but I believe the idea is that and I'm not 100% sure how it works. All I know is that they weren't really big on talking about it. I think Vice News was the ones who reported about it, the group in the Nordic states, but is more a way that they can comply with local regulation about energy and environmental impact.
So here's what I'm learning. So basically, when it comes to mining today, spoke to an operation that's down in Delta, and these guys just raised some money. But it seems like most mining facilities that exist they've got an array. They got a couple of megawatts, or maybe they're in the teens now in terms of energy, but they're not using any storage. So batteries have to come way down, but they're basically just I got the panels out during the day for 5 or 6 hours out here in Colorado. They'll harness that energy, they'll sell it back to the grid, and they're just subsidizing their energy bill. So there's nobody that's actually running 100% off grid. And so, you guys know the house I just moved into is completely off grid. So I've had a separate education on trying to how to manage energy in a much different way. But what I've learned is the solar is at least to a point, even though it's only like, maybe 23, 24% efficient, the panels, it's at a cost level and it's at a productivity level where at least most houses in the United States could run off of solar during the day, except for maybe some northern states. But the batteries as well, the lithium-ion batteries, they've come way down. So I was telling you guys earlier, an 18 kilowatt battery, which that's sufficient for most houses. The average house uses, I think, 30 kilowatt hours a day, something along those lines. Um, maybe it's actually way less than that. I'll have to look at all that. But basically, uh, what I'm trying to say is the technology is there. The prices have come way down, and so we're gonna look at actually mining Bitcoin. But here's the thing: Bitcoin uses, like, the miners, the Bitmain S19s. They use 5,500 watts, and so
Yeah.
that's a lot. That's basically, so that would be taking everything. As I said, I'm completely off grid. I've got 4 arrays of solar panels and a windmill, and my energy use in my house is really high. So so we're at 70 kilowatt hours a day, which is like 3 times the normal. And so I could basically take my setup and we could run one miner all night long. I've got these Fortress Evervolt Max batteries that are 18 kilowatts. And I have 5 of those. So that just kind of puts things into context. That's how much energy you need just to run one of those miners that's producing $25 a day. Actually, it's probably less than that now that Bitcoin's down. So the economics definitely don't make sense. But John, to your point, if you add hydro to that, and in the windmill offset, you've got enough property to put a lot of solar panels, we're getting pretty close to being able to do this and actually be profitable. So we're going to try it.
Doing like just simple napkin. Yeah. So just doing simple napkin math, if one of those miners at 1500 watts running for 24 hours, you're looking at 3.6, 3.7 kilowatt hours. So that is the
5,500.
equivalent of my apartment here. 5500?
Yeah. Yeah. 5.5.
Yeah. Well, no, they don't.
They're crazy.
So they use, 5,500 watts is what they pull. So
Oh,
Yep.
5,500 watts each.
Yep. Yeah.
yeah, they're
Yeah.
Wow. So yeah, never mind. That's almost 14 kilowatt hours. Jesus. Yeah, that's a significant difference. So to run, let's just say $25 a day each, you to make $100, you would need almost, let's just say 15, 60 kilowatt hours of power per
So
24 hours.
basically, people that are running ant miners, like retail guys and girls, they're making money if they're paying, the utility company, I don't know, anywhere from like 9 or 10 cents, below.
Mm-hmm.
My whole setup cost all in, minus the windmill. The windmill is 10 grand. I didn't put that in though, and I didn't put in the 2 arrays. But I would imagine if I was going to put in the windmill myself and put in the 2 other arrays, so to generate the 70 kilowatt hours, which would run one of these miners all day and all night with all 5 18 kilowatt batteries, you're talking $150,000 to make $10,000 a year, right? So the economics, unless you have, they don't make sense, because the payback for that is, it's a long time. So, but if you add hydro to that, and if you do some of the things that we're talking about, you can make this work, and you don't have to get, the batteries are a killer, right? Because they're $15,000 a piece. So that right there is probably 55% of the cost, and you don't need to run these things at night. In Colorado, you get 5 hours of sunlight a day.
Why not just make your own battery at that point?
Well, that's what we were talking about. So walk me through that.
Yeah, it's a real question.
Yeah.
Of recycle. Yeah, like if we're trying to, keep the cost, if we want to keep the cost down and be good about it, there are ways, if you have the time, that you could recycle cells. Forgot what they're called, like the 23080 cells that you see in like all cars and like handheld electronics. It's a very common cell type. If you have the time to build the packs, and you can buy the pieces online, or just like a little template of plastics where you line up the plastics and then flip in the cells, you punch solder each one, and then you put it to a BMS system, and then you have a full cell system. So it doesn't come with any of the safety features.
But do you have to get involved in the chemistry?
Was
So
that?
I know that you can buy used. I know you can buy
Oh,
used Tesla cells. Teslas that have been in a
mhm.
wreck. How do you connect the cells though? That's one area that I have no idea. I mean, do you have to literally positive to negative, or do you just get the cells and then you have to put a battery management system, and that's pretty much it?
Yeah, so each cell, no two battery cells are chemically identical. They're 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 relatively close to each other. Batteries, that's why if you ever took a 9 volt battery or like a 1.5 volt battery, might be 1.52, it might be 1.5012 or something. It's close enough that it doesn't matter because you have a lot of electronics that filter out that noise. But most battery packs are not all chemically identical. It's just close enough. What Tesla and those companies do is they try to match cells that are close enough chemically and then put them in a pack. And you could do that by just testing your own cells and saying, okay, we're going to build a 500 watt-hour wall of batteries. Just start testing them and then profiling them for like certain type of voltage, and then you would build your bricks from there. There's a lot of cool people that have done it online and actually converted cars using that same principle. I could find it, but a guy converted a Porsche 911 using old Tesla battery packs, and by checking the chemistry of the packs and then putting them in series in a certain way, he was able to get a really cool car.
Crazy.
So that's a
Okay.
more DIY route that you could document, and there's plenty of documentation out there. But the one downside, even though the cost might be cheaper, is some of the safety systems that you would see in bigger commercial packs, like heat management, overcharge, undercharge protection, which comes off your BMS most of the time. Um, you would be responsible for that. So if you get a cell that is bad and it's overcharged and it catches fire, you know, you're AWOL a little bit.
Well, so
So
that's some context we should add for the conversation, because we put a
yeah,
shipping container basically underground. So we've got enough rack space to put 30 of the Bitmine S19 Pro. I think the XP was one of the models we were looking at. The new water cooled ones, and we've got a source for water to pump through these guys. And so I like for the batteries though. I guess we'd have to. That's a good temperature, I think, for batteries, and we've also got fans. We've got a ventilation system. So and in Colorado, it's we get
wow.
the last 2 months have been the hottest, but it hasn't even been that hot. Climate change is a real thing. It's like living in a rainforest. It rains every single day for at least 4 or 5 hours. It's unbelievable. I've never seen a Western state look so green in all my life. So all that'll kind of help. But I look, I think it would be worth if we don't put the batteries together, the cells together ourselves. I think that may be worthwhile, but it's definitely not worth chancing a fire. Um, at least running one of these, then I would just get maybe one Fortress battery, or maybe we can parse off of my house a little bit, because I'm not going to use the amount of energy that I'm producing during the day in my house. And so maybe there's a way that we can tie the two together. But what I'd be more interested in than the batteries are, do we just go Bitmain and call it a day, or do we try to hack together? Because you guys are really good with hardware and figuring those kinds of things out.
Okay, before we go into hardware, I was going to ask if you guys have looked at like mechanical or gravity fed batteries yet. So a simple
I
version would be you
have
like pump
not.
water up a hill when you have high energy, you store it, and when you have low energy, you like send it
Mm,
back down and do like hydroelectric. And you can also do it by like building
yeah,
like a tower of bricks essentially. So like stack it up when you have high energy, and then you like lower it back down with gravity when you have low energy.
I've heard about that. I saw no tangent, but like a documentary where they talked about old ways they would spin a wheel and the momentum of the wheel would keep going, like in old times in New York. when electricity was during the industrial age. So yeah,
Like a Ronin coil
you
or
do
like
live in the
a
mountains, so that is feasible. Yep, it's a I forgot what it's called, but it's pretty much a wheel that they, when energy is cheap, they spun it, and then when it was expensive, they would siphon the kinetic energy off it and translate that back. And this that's a good idea, Brock. But then it posed the question, like how much underlying infrastructure do you need to do that? Because then you have to like build a moat. You need to have a containment system.
You would for water, but the like Steven, you have the space out there to do like if you had a crane and concrete blocks that you stacked up. I don't know how to build this per se, but I've seen them.
we'd have to design it. We've got the
Yes,
space.
I've
We've
seen
got the
that
space for
too.
sure.
Yeah, it stacks. It just stacks it.
Yeah, yeah.
Though there's the hazard of if it falls, and also
He's
wind. I
he's
feel
got
like
enough space.
Look,
I don't doubt
I
that. I'm just
I
worried
think
about the wind and the kids.
well, John. So
Concrete flying everywhere.
Brock and I were just. This might help you in terms of your thinking. So look, we're not doing this for we're not doing this to lose a bunch of money, but we're also, we were running one day and we were like, look, we've got the space, we've got the energy here, and we've got the mindset to
Uh-huh.
experiment. And nobody's really experimenting because most people are setting up these facilities as to run a business, right? You can't run a business if you're like, if they're saying, how are you going to make
Yeah.
money long term? And you can't
Yep.
answer that question
Yeah.
easily. And so the one thing that we do want to do is experiment with some crazy things like this. And so Brock, it's not a yeah, I'm gonna have to read more about it though, because I kind of know what you're talking about, but and they're not using magnets or anything like that.
No, it's just like super simple, like literally a crane is stacking these giant, like 1 ton concrete bricks. Um, yeah, and like stacks them up when there's extra energy and then lowers them back down to draw the energy back out.
Hmm.
That's cool. Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, it's
I think
Yeah.
the first big question should be like trying a few different ways of containing energy and making it feasible, and then build off that. Because I feel, especially with miners, like they just get better and better each day. So even if the miners are introduced at a later date, I think that first problem is solving the energy problem, because I feel like at the end of the day, that's where most of the costs can come from.
well, what about creating our own ASIC? Like in building our own ant miner. So like 2000, what was it, like 14 or 15? I may be way off, but when people figured out, people figured out first of all, you could, in the early days, right? I could use my Mac to mine Bitcoin. I could use a CPU. Then people are like, hey, let's use a graphics card. And then people are like, look, let's use ASICs. Let's be very specific about what this machine's supposed to do. So where does it go from here, right? Maybe that's one of the ways we should be thinking about it. Maybe we build something ground up, or walk me
So
through that,
I
because
feel at
that's an
some rate,
area. What's happening with these S19s, right? They're really good at solving the SHA-256 algorithm, but why is that? What was it? Is it a combination of, because you're joining a pool, and the pool is basically, or you can mine it yourself, but most people are joining a pool, so that's on the software side, that's on the economic side. But what is it about these machines? How does Bitmain and companies
Yep.
like that, how do they create these things to be even more powerful each year? What are they adding to it?
well, looking at an Antminer from 9, so I'm guessing this is pretty old. Um, it looks like it's just a simple box. I'm guessing they're like parallelizing certain things
Yeah,
in
they,
some
they
capacity.
they keep cramming more GPU power in, and they're whatever they're doing with the like motherboard CPU combo, it's like hyper specific to be efficient for solving these hashes.
Hmm. Do they have their own OS? I'm curious. That might be
Yeah,
interesting.
it's like a really
Do
really
they
thin
really?
Linux type thing. Yeah,
But their value adds not in their software. I mean, maybe I mean it's they
no,
somehow figured out a way to put hardware parts together, and they're not creating the.
yeah. I was gonna say it's similar, and at least in my head, it's similar to like you take the Apple and their M1 chip, Like you plug that M1 chip into a non-Apple software computer, and it's just not going to perform the same. So there's some sort of optimization they figured out.
Is there one? Let me see if I can find like. Is there like a teardown? I think that would be interesting to see, like Antminer, like a teardown, because that
Probably.
could tell you a lot. Because at the end of the day, most chips are made by 3 companies in the world,
They're not making
and
their
a
own
lot of
chip.
it is still standardized. I think yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like a lot of it. So if you could figure out what, because they're, to Brock's point, the M1, they're using hardware to accelerate. So if you could figure out what the hardware is, you could potentially either, I don't want to say build your own, but find a way that you could do it.
Well, you could look. This isn't. Um, I think if you understood a little bit more about it on the hardware side, they could definitely. I think they're out of Dubai, and I think they've got a Chinese manufacturer or some relationship. I'm pretty sure they're assembled in China, but look, it was basically like let's take graphics card and let's just Brock, to your point, let's just keep increasing the amount of graphics card that we put in these things. But I'm just wondering, I don't know. It seems like there's not a lot of there's a couple of companies that are building just to sell these things, but I wonder if it would be worth, if we decide to go with, a couple of these S19s, maybe to try to build our own. And it would be interesting too to just see what these things are made up of.
I found an Antminer silicon. It's in Arabic, but I can put it in the chat. But it looks like it is a. I don't know if we even have a chat here.
Like
Oh, there we go.
I one of the Litecoin ones. I haven't torn it apart.
You can ship it to
Well,
me
anyway,
and I'll
that
tear it
that
apart.
Yeah,
yeah, maybe that's what we got to do. Maybe John, I'll just buy a.
like it's
Well, I mean, they're expensive though. That's
like this is the whole piece. Yeah,
Oh
it's just
yeah.
like this little tiny board, and then it's plugged into 4 GPU units,
Oh wow.
and then it's got 2 fans on either side. That's like the entire thing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. There's a yeah, I don't know. I don't like putting all my eggs in one basket. That's why I'm like on the fence. I think having multiple GPUs, but then here's the thing. Those GPUs are designed not for this really. So there's going to be driver level restrictions that potentially could be bottlenecks that prevent us from pretty much
Hmm.
in the same place pretty much because I know at least with the NVIDIA, they've tried to, quote unquote, tried, not slanderous at all, but to block mining, but the drivers get cracked and leaked within 24 hours. So,
here's what I say we do.
um, I don't know.
Let's see if we can find somebody on YouTube that tore one of these things apart. It doesn't matter who the manufacturer is. If not, John, I'm going to buy one and send it to you, and then let's figure out what's in these things, and then let's take a trip to Shenzhen, and let's just create our own. We'll assemble the parts ourselves, and then Brock, you can put together the
I,
software that we need, and we'll just fire up like this crazy concoction of hardware.
Totally game. I will also like instead of buying one and taking it apart, we can take apart this one. Like I'll take it apart and send some photos.
yeah, that's. I think the we need to. It's not about the. Stephen, you made a good point. It's not about the manufacturer. It's about the components that make it up. Power supply, GPU, and pretty much the interfaces. That's how it scales. Because I'm pretty sure these ant miners, the bigger they get, they're just scaling them in parallel. Like I've seen some pictures where they just have racks where they're scaling these hashing components. So, um, and Stephen, to your other point, I'd love to go to Shenzhen. I just don't think I'd ever come back. I would just live there in a building, building stuff.
That's all right.
Rachel would get mad at you.
You can run the office there. It'll be great.
I just
Rachel wouldn't
open
be
up an
too happy
office.
then.
Yeah.
She doesn't have to know about it. That's the difference.
All right, so basically, just to sum things up, I mean, or at least sum up the first part of this. So basically, what we're doing is we've got the shipping container in the ground, we've got the infrastructure to it, meaning we've got the ability to run the solar panels in. We've got a water connection. We've got a water source. We've got a solar source. We have a wind source that we may not use initially. And so the batteries, we can take a look and see what it would take to put together maybe one of these used battery Tesla. What they do is they basically take a car that was in a wreck and then they resell the batteries, or somebody does. And so that we could do as sort of a side project. I do think, though, John, after you look at the specs on the S19, and then we think that we can make it work from the energy side, maybe we just start off with one when you guys come out next month, and we just kind of take baby steps. And then as a side project, I think what would be even more fun, though, honestly, and this could actually, like, let's say we're successful with creating our own miner. That is a much better business than us trying to actually mine, or maybe they'll just go together in a really cool way. But I like the idea of, Brock, if you can take some photos and send them to John, and then John, let's get you to take apart one of these things, or get you the right videos to watch.
Yeah.
And see if we can just kind of do that off to the side while we're running the off-grid operation.
Yeah, I think that's a good way. We kind of parallelize the work and stuff. I think the biggest benefit would be when we get pictures of the hardware is to get SKU numbers, because that tells us a lot about requirements.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
I have a feeling. I'm trying to figure out. So the SKU numbers, each chip has a code that tells us what it is, where it's from, and who manufactured it. But then you can go look it up and actually see, like, is it something that we can't get on our own? Is it like something that is locked, pretty much?
Like proprietary.
Pretty much hardware locked. Pretty much. Well, everything's technically proprietary, but I can't go online and order it. It can only be ordered through the company that's made for. Like,
so is that what companies do? They go to Intel and they say we need a specific chip for. Yep. Okay. I'm just trying to bridge the two. So I'm the idiot in the crowd, and I'm trying to figure out, like, all right, Brock software, John hardware, CPU, graphics cards. I know they work in tandem, but I was thinking it's like, I don't know. I wasn't thinking it was on the chip level. So on the chip level, then that's a software question. And then can anybody go to a chip manufacturer? Do you have to be? Forget about cost for a second. Could people like us go to Intel and say, hey, we want to buy a very specific chip?
If money was not an issue, yeah, because that's where they make their money. They take royalties. It's like pharmaceuticals. They'll build a certain chip architecture. For example, the U.S. government, when they were building Argonne Labs, had a 10-year contract lease that Intel would buy build a set of chips for their supercomputers that they're not allowed to sell to any private or government entity for 15 years. And then after 15 years, Intel can take it and put it as prosumer, consumer, whatever. But yeah, that exists if money was not a cost.
The only other thing I was going to ask about is right now we're talking about competing with ASIC miners, so to mine Bitcoin specifically. I think the other path that we haven't really talked about is if we were to do graphics cards and like build our own rig to compete for other currencies.
ETH is the only currency that I like, and they're going proof of stake.
Yeah, so I think it's a hard question. I think it's more flexible, but until the ecosystem of crypto,
there's always something else to mine, though.
But how much that involves a lot of upfront effort to set it up.
Maybe not less than building our own ASIC, or maybe not more than building our own ASIC. Yeah,
that's fair. Yeah, I'll give you that. That's fair.
Is Solana is Solana? Do you mine Solana, or are they proof of stake?
I think they're like semi-centralized even.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not. We could do that. Look, I actually, John, for your sake, I think graphics card would be easier because we can get all of those parts, and it seems like a much simpler project. But the question is, part of the thesis is things are down on the dumps right now. Maybe we get cut another 50%, but in the next cycle, a lot of things get weeded out. We learned that from the first cycle or the last cycle, I guess you could say. That definitely wasn't the first. So what do we think is still going to be around, right? So like I've never thought about Litecoin and Dogecoin until Brock brought it up, and the fact that you can do it simultaneously is kind of interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. But don't those have dedicated rigs for those, or no?
They do. So like Litecoin and Dogecoin do specifically, but there are other currencies you can mine simultaneously as well, because it's all about the hashing algorithm. So if they share a hashing
Right.
algorithm, then you can mine them simultaneously. But there's not a lot of software that supports that.
Point. Interesting. So is the value add more in the software versus
Well,
the
I
hardware, at
I
least?
think it's potentially both. Like so, graphics cards you can get more
Yeah.
bang for your buck, but you gotta search for it. So it's got to be like
Right.
buying wholesale from somebody who's like done with mining and wants to dump their 100 graphics cards, and we figure out how to put them all together. And then we write smart software to like pick which coin to mine when based on current like prices in the market, and we auto exchange into Bitcoin, so
Hmm.
we're always getting Bitcoin at the end of the day. Those sorts of things.
Yeah. But also that brings up a good point about what was I gonna say? If they use the same hashing, how hard is it? Just I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but is there ever a world where you could say I want to start mining this and just automate it? Say add it to the pool and it just
Yeah,
deploys. Interesting.
that's what's possible with GPUs, not ASIC. Because ASIC, you're like locked
Yeah,
in.
that's yeah, you're locked in. And then the question becomes, at the end of their life cycle, what happens? Like, what is the life cycle of the ASIC miners right now?
Usually about 5 years
5 years.
if you treat them well. Yeah.
Interesting. So potentially, the miners, if we hit if let's just say we didn't hit the bottom, and you let's say that you do 5 miners, you might actually not even break even potentially. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. You wouldn't break even, right? Potentially.
If the price of Bitcoin stayed way low.
Yeah.
So I mined Zcash a couple years ago. It was 2018 maybe, and it was off of 5 graphics cards. And but the way that it was profitable, it was profitable in 6 months, but it's because I rode. It couldn't have been 2018 then. Maybe it was in I don't know when Zcash came out. It was right when it came out, and I rode the wave up, which helped. But the payoff, even when it was down, was like a year and a half, so it wasn't too bad. So maybe Zcash is something that we look at, or one of these. I don't know, Monero. I'm not really sure. We have to look at these algorithms, but it's actually not a bad idea.
Yeah. I'm interested in Zcash. I haven't spent that much time with it, but I think, yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of in the weeds here. Like I think plug and play is the best thing. Like where's I think the bigger question we need to answer is what's more important to us, having the flexibility to do different things long term without having to give more overhead up front, or having a versatile setup that requires more setup, but we kind of have an insurance policy that we can pivot relatively easy, and that's excluding the whole power component. I don't know. I think that's the question.
We want to make money in one of three ways. We either want to do
Who
it
doesn't?
through the mining itself, through the creativity and ingenuity of the three of us coming up with something that is unique to a specific algorithm that might surpass something that we could sell as basically an infrastructure business or component or add-on. Or I guess you could say on the maybe on the software side would be the third way. So it's quite kind of like this podcast, right? It's just this experimental. It's conversations that we have, but we don't just have conversations. We actually build things all the time, and so it's just a
Mm-hmm.
matter of let's just continue to do that and see what kind of comes out of it, because there's all these unexpected things. We always go to build one thing, and 6 other more valuable things come about out of that.
Yeah, it's interesting to explore because there's just so many options. So I think you get decision fatigue. I think the hardest thing in this problem set is there's so many combinations because there's just too many components that need to be considered. but each one of those considerations has a whole laundry list of different pivots that you have to consider,
Let me
and
simplify it,
downfalls
John.
too. So I think that is kind of,
I,
yeah.
I'm gonna simplify it. So let's do this, right? I'll come up with a budget. Here's what we can spend, and then why don't you guys come up with, let's go one ASIC. Let's pick one ASIC. And then let's just go through the exercise
Hmm.
of doing the math. I'll send you a spec sheet of. I'm going to give you the power that I have
Yep.
today, and I'm
Perfect.
not using all that. And maybe we can just, for the ASIC, that'll just be sort of a nice little side income project. And the fact that we'll have some water resources too, Brock, that'll help.
Hmm.
And so that's the simplest, and I think we go down that path. But then let's also allocate a portion of the budget to coming up with a GPU. Let's not build our own ASIC to start, but let's start thinking about that. But let's actually start building the graphics side of things. Let's pick a coin like Zcash.
Yep.
Let's all do some research and then just reconnect in next week and say, hey, this is what I researched. This is what you researched, and then we'll build our own GPU setup. While we're setting up everything else, because it's not that complex to do the ASIC. It sounds like.
Yeah. Um,
I like that.
yeah. It just plug it in. I think you just plug it in, set up the account, and that's it.
Yeah,
That's
that
about it.
ASICs are super easy.
So really, the value add that we're
Cool.
providing, if anybody even cares, is that we're completely off grid and we're going to be mining. So the off grid part, that setup, I think people
Yep.
would be interested in learning more about. In fact, I know they are, because we just talked to that mining facility down the street, and they're interested because everybody's trying to figure this out, how not to rely on the grid to do this stuff. So that'll sort of be a side thing that we can publish. But John
Yep.
and Brock will be a lot more involved on, I feel like, to create an ASIC, because there's a software component there. Maybe that's just kind of like, let's just start a document and hash it out. But on the graphic side, John, you can actually start looking
Yeah.
at hardware and figuring out what we want to do there, right?
Yep. Yeah. We can start. We can start seeing what's out there, and I think we're going into crypto winter, and some people are giving up and some people are ambitious, and plus we've seen the last 2 years with COVID and how that's affected graphics cards. There's just so much out there that we could pick for.
Hmm.
Yeah, and even if we pick used cards at like pennies on the dollar, we can use them as dummy cards just to test shit out, rip them apart, figure something out,
Yep.
have fun with it.